Welcome to In Tune with Reality, the stories behind the music. Episode 9, Sounds of Identity, Bridging Cultures Through Music. Welcome to this episode of In Tune with Reality, the stories behind the music. And today I am so excited to introduce to everyone Maestro and Dr. Diego Piedra, who was one of the first artists who influenced my career as a child. And I am so excited to have you here today to talk about your career and everything that you have done in the world of music.
So happy to be here with you, Samuel. It's an honor for me to be here with you after so many years and so many things that have happened in between for both of us. It's a very exciting moment, and thank you.
Absolutely. And for me, it's a pleasure. And for those who have no idea who Diego Piedra is, he is one of our directors at the foundation. And he is also faculty at Valparaiso University, violinist, conductor, father, and an extraordinary person who inspired the young generation of musicians to become the best musicians they can. So, Diego, can you share a little bit about your journey as a musician, as a violinist and conductor, coming from Costa Rica, and how you have established orchestras through your journey?
Certainly. Well, it all started many years ago. I started studying violin when I was 6 years old. My family, we're all musicians. We are 4 brothers. I am the second one. And I started studying violin because my oldest brother was studying violin. You see, my mom is a pianist. And so in my house, we were always surrounded by music, by piano. And when we were kids, my parents decided that we should take music lessons after school. So we started doing that, and my oldest brother started with violin, and I found out from very early that if I did anything that he did, he would get mad. So I would grab his violin and start playing, and eventually he quit, and I just kept playing violin ever since. He went through many other instruments as we were growing up, and he finally became a percussionist, and I remained playing violin. So that's what I've been doing, for most of my life, playing violin. And then once I got into college, I went to Baylor University in Texas, and I got an opportunity there to study to conduct the Waco Symphony Youth Orchestra. And that opportunity came through a class that I was taking, first elementary conducting and then intermediate conducting. And at the time, there was a need for a conductor for that orchestra, and I was doing very well. And I was offered the position. I said yes, so why not? And I tried it and I liked it, and I found that I had this very interesting connection with the musicians from the podium, and that was a completely new experience for me. At the time, that was pretty much the first ever chance that I had gotten in front of an orchestra. Before that point, I was only playing violin and chamber music for the first time also at Baylor. And then after that, I did that for a year. After that, I went to school to the University of Michigan for my master's degree in violin performance. But while I was there, I got in touch with my to-be professor of conducting, Kenneth Kisler, and I told him, I have this video of myself conducting an orchestra, and I would like for you to see it because, it's something that I did in the past, and I really liked it, and I would like to see if, you see anything there that is worth pursuing, or if, in your opinion, you could tell me as a friend, yeah, no, keep playing violin. But no, at the end, after 2 years, we sat down together and we saw the video, and he liked what he saw, and he told me, I can tell that you have the right instincts, and the only thing is that you've never had a teacher. And I told him, yeah, that is exactly how it is for me. I really haven't studied properly, and so he invited me to audition the next year, and I did, and I think I did better than he expected me to have done, because there were only 2 spots available that year, and the 2 spots were given to students who were coming from winning international competitions and things. These are people who have been conducting, for many, many years, and that they had decided for years that that's what they had wanted to do with their lives. And there was I, just trying it and see what happened. And to cut the story short, I was about to get back to Costa Rica because I was doing my OPT, that is the optional practical training, the work permit that one can perform as a foreign student after graduation. I was playing professionally violin during that time, and I needed to do something to remain in the US, and so I did some conducting auditions. And once I told my teacher, I need your recommendation letter because I had been accepted to such and such school, he said, where? And so I said, here and here. No, you can go there, he said. I'm like, why not? Because you already know more than the people who are teaching there. I'm like, well, I would love to go there and study with you, but, And he's like, have you gotten your rejection letter? And then I said, no. And he said, that's because I've been holding it. And I'm like, okay, I need to get it, with me and so I can work and get this done, and so that I can go. And at the end, turns out that I was very, very lucky that I had a wonderful sponsor who was able to provide financially for me to go, and that's how I started to go and take conducting as a career at the University of Michigan. After I graduated from that was my second master's degree, I went back home and I started working with orchestras and developing orchestras. At the moment, then this was the year 2008, September, more or less, we were in Costa Rica giving birth to our own version of El Sistema. And it's called SINEM, SINEM. And it stands for Sistema Nacional de Educación Musical, or National System of Music Education. And like I say, the system was being born, and I happened to be there at just the right time, because there was a great need for someone who had been educated in conducting and who was also a string player. And there was I, ready-made. And we started developing orchestras in strategic places throughout the country. And so I would go from place to place, visiting there, seeing the students, seeing the teachers, and doing clinics and many things to help them out and get them started. And I did that for a number of years. And I was able to visit other countries in Central America, as well as Venezuela, which is where you and I met. And then I came back and did more of the same. After that, I went back to Michigan in 2015 to get my doctoral degree in conducting. And after that, I started working and professionally, and I worked presently at the University of Valparaiso in Indiana, and that's where I am.
So, Diego, how would you put into words um, the results as a comparison between what you were able to see in Venezuela versus what you were doing in Costa Rica and what you observed in different countries, let's say the US or other Central American um, countries?
I think the biggest surprise for me when I went to Venezuela was to see the amount of people who were involved in playing music and the passion that all the students had. For me, that was a big eye opener, and very personally, the experience for me in your orchestra. Um, for me, it was completely unheard of to rehearse every day, and I mean from Monday to Monday. I had never experienced that in my life. And one of the most memorable moments for me was that, after how many? 4 hours, right? 4 hours of rehearsals. I would close my score at 7, and I would be completely tired and sweaty and just completely spent. And then I would get this from all of you. And to me, that was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I opened my score and let's go. We can still play, I guess, while the parents come and pick up the children. So for me, that was like the biggest surprise. In the rest of the countries that I have been, there has always been this great happiness as well to play and to learn music. And in different regions, depending on how developed this part of town or this particular city is, then I also find or have found different levels of commitment and different levels of enjoyment from the students. Some of them, they have been, one has had to work a little more to get through because of, social circumstances and things like this. But I suppose in every case, seeing the child's face when they're picking up their instruments and playing together always has brought joy and always has been something that lights a light behind their eyes and soul. And to me, that has been always so priceless and so meaningful and so much more than the simple act of playing music, or the fact of what we are being taught in schools and throughout the studies, which is here's your music, learn it, you play it in such a few days or a few months, and that's it. And then after that, you play another one, and so on.
So, you talked about the things that are unbelievable about El Sistema in comparison to any other program, which is true. We rehearse from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. from Monday to Monday. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, it was in the mornings from 8 to 12. And because both of us have had this great opportunity to visit different countries and music programs, we know that the structure of these programs change based on the country, based on the structure of how their kind of like socioeconomic and demographics are being playing a role in their cities and states. How was it for you to see, for example, here in the US, 3 hours of rehearsal, 2.5, and it's from this, and then there is this structure and methodology and syllabus and all of this thing. And then going to Venezuela after you were exposed to that methodical type of learning and structure, which is great. and then just being in front of this monster with the eagerness of all of these children wanting to have more hours of rehearsals and lessons. Um, and then continuing what you were already doing in Costa Rica, what do you think were the biggest challenges that you encounter when drawing from all of these experiences?
So coming back to that, one of the biggest things for me was seeing the amount of, just realizing the amount of hours and work that was put in by everybody in Venezuela showed me that the real reason why, as you say, they're such monsters is because they spend so much time playing, and it reaches a point where it becomes fun, and it's like intoxicating, and it's like an infection, everybody gets it and everybody wants to keep going. So that made me see many things. For example, when I was there in Venezuela, I saw that many people would have a lot of technical problems or differences, let's call them, when it was time to play. Like a different way of holding the bow, for example, that wasn't tolerated, let's say, at school. But then these people, with that kind of technique, would grab the instrument and play like angels, and play incredibly good. And so that made me think, what does all this that I've been studying mean if, at the end, with all the best technique and all this and that, we don't get there? What's going on? What's the difference? What's happening? So after this trip to Venezuela, every time I was in front of an orchestra, I would tell them stories. And even to this day, I tell them stories about my time there and how much I learned and from what I saw. People can't believe when I say, kids who were in primary school and elementary school, we were playing Romeo and Juliet, Tchaikovsky, and many other pieces, hard pieces, not arrangements. How did they do that? How is it possible? Well, because they work so much, because they play so much. They may lack, the same kind of instruction that you get here, which is 1-to-1 every week, but they put in the amount of work in different ways. They play together. They study together. They play from one another. And after they're done in orchestra, maybe they still hang out and they take their instruments and they play and they go over the music together, and it becomes this, activity that it's part of their lives and who they are. And at the end, when they come together, they're extremely professional. And they have this sense of responsibility and respect and devotion for the music. And that's something that is quite moving and wonderful. People who don't, who haven't seen that kind of commitment, it's hard for people to understand how that works. Because in any other part of the world, playing music becomes, really an extracurricular activity after hours, and it has, it has a structure, and it has, we have orchestra these many days for this amount of time, and then that's done. there's only so much one can do with that kind of structure. Um, so it's very limiting. And so that was very much a challenge for me to try to incorporate this infection, for the music, and this excitement, and this and all this passion, that I saw in the other countries. And some people have it, some people have it, and some people want to do it. But there is also a cultural issue, I think, and that also has to do with the fact that the musical traditions in different countries varies quite a bit too. For example, in Venezuela, you possess an incredible wealth of music, and many different traditional instruments and traditional pieces that are indigenous to Venezuela. You have your very particular waltzes, for example, the Venezuelan waltzes, and you have many other types of songs and folk songs, and some of them, the pajarillos, and all of those are quite particular and quite difficult for someone who studied music to understand it, to break it apart into pieces and see what happens here and there and how do they do it. That's, of course, the take of someone who has studied music in school, in music school. But the people who play that, of course, you and I know that they don't need that, and they probably haven't studied the way that I have or that you have, and yet they play this incredibly difficult music. So that has been, the greatest thing and lesson for me, to try to take from and to use to inspire the students who I am in contact with.
I think that the reason why there is such a big dichotomy between both the behavior of the musician and the way that we approach music when you compare the US or any other country is because when I ask musicians here in the US or in even Europe, Asia, during my travels, what does music means to them? They say, well, this is an activity I have to do. This is a requirement I have to fulfill. This is a grade I have to get. When for us, it was a way of survival. It was a way to escape from many of the other things happening in the surroundings. It was a way for us to connect, a way for us to build family, a way for us to congregate all together through the power of music, whether it was classical music or popular music or not. And I think that the reason why it's so unbelievable for people who come from other countries and systems and schools to see what you said, like someone in primary school playing these very complicated and hard pieces, and from the Western European classical repertoire, and from composers that are highly recognized, is because the concept of difficulty, the concept of leveling and categorizing how hard the piece was, did not exist. For us, it was the joy of playing music. And if it was difficult, technically, we would just play. Let's just try, because it's fun. So there is no this preconceived idea that, oh my goodness, I have to practice and I have to do this and I have a lesson and I need to get this done. Because music was never a requirement. Music was never something extra. Music for us in El Sistema became a philosophy of living. So, of course, by seeing this, I'm not saying that many other countries don't have that. On the contrary, this is nothing. This has nothing to do with the program, with the system. It has to do with the person. I have met a lot of people here in the U.S., in South America, in Europe, who they live through what they do. It's like they breathe what they do. And that's really inspiring, whether that's architecture, literature, law. Like, it doesn't matter which area, but you can just feel and hear the passion when they speak, when they communicate that. And I think that what we actually have to do, um, nowadays, is try to identify that fire and that passion on the child, so that we are able to ignite and to guide them through that process. Because I think that the reason why many programs who try to copy El Sistema and be like El Sistema like program fail at, was the idea of, okay, we have to teach like El Sistema. How are you even thinking of teaching like El Sistema in a country where the barriers, the mindsets, the life experiences of the children that are being a part of your program are nothing near to what we go through in Venezuela? So it makes literally no sense. And also, I think that the idea that music is open for everyone, that is a free resource in our country, is a very powerful one, because I wouldn't be here and many of us wouldn't be who we are today if it wasn't because of this opportunity. So I think that it has to do a lot with the experience that you are exposed to. And I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you if you wouldn't have gone to Venezuela to meet El Sistema and the orchestra. So again, we are talking about that, the evolution and the process of advancing towards a better future comes through the experiences and the connections and things that you built in life. It's like what you were sharing about your studies in conducting and the professor, and then all of these things wouldn't have happened if someone wouldn't have been there, if a program wouldn't have shown up for you, if someone wouldn't have given you that opportunity. So that's what leads me to the next question. As a Latino musician, and coming from Costa Rica and having experienced all of that contrast, how do you see yourself here in the US, and what challenges or struggles or issues did you find during your career, if any? And then I would love to share mine, but I want to hear from your perspective, because there is a important gap of more than a decade in between us, which I think it's very, very important, for us to kind of like see, okay, this is what you went through during the time that social media was not a strong thing. This is what I go through now. So I would love to hear about your experience in that sense, and then that way I can understand then, how do you use your heritage coming from South America, what you have learned, into diversifying the experience of your own students? Because I know that you are very big in being open to a lot of things. So what can you share?
Well, interestingly, um, it has been a few years, not that many, but in technological years, when I went to school, I think social media didn't exist, at least in the way that it does now. I remember that Facebook was starting to be born, but it was limited to college students at the time. But in any case, like I said before, I was very lucky that I there was a big donor that enabled me and a bunch of other Costa Ricans to go like in chains, in chain of like, I mean, one person would go, and then this person who was there would talk about, I know this such and such other student, who is very talented, and I see that you have, this vacancy in the orchestra, and you could reinforce them and blah blah blah. So that's how me and myself and my brother and many others before and after us were able to go and study. Culturally speaking, I think having us there, we were a group of Latinos from Costa Rica and Venezuela. We inserted so much Latin flavor in the orchestra because, we're just culturally different. We are very affectionate people. We are very warm. We're not necessarily what I would call, introverted, quiet people. And I think, one of the biggest things for us maybe is that we let ourselves be taken by the music in ways that, are not or don't come natural to the Americans. Or at least that has been my experience. As a violinist, I remember this very well. I would have, all my stand partners, they would be mostly from here, from the US, and some of them quite good players. But they were the kind of player who would sit down and play and be done, with not much in between as far as passion and this drive and this energy emanating from them because they're being moved by the music and this vicious cycle of so that was very interesting. I remember receiving comments such as I really like how you get so taken by the music and that you do this and you do that and you insert these glissandos or you make your vibrato more intense here or there, and how do you do that? I'm like, well, I guess I just listen to what's happening around me and just don't think about the technique, don't think about, just feel the music, feel the music, and if it causes you anger, then play angry. If it causes you joy, be joyful. If it causes you, to melt your heart, then melt with it, and let that just come through. And I remember, after sharing those comments, saying, I think you've changed me. Because I can never play the same way as I did before. And I'm like, well, there you go. That's part of what I call living the music, not just playing it, but living it. And that, to me, makes a whole world of difference because it changes the performance and it changes the human being who plays the music. It's no longer, as you said, a chore. It's not something that we have to do to get, a grade, but something that, we just happen to be graded on because that's part of this, school system or whatever. But that's one of the things that I like the most, getting into people's heads to tell them, just be what the music wants you to be. Feel it and react to it, provoke it, and then be vulnerable so that you also, take from others what they're doing and be inspired by them and be energized by them. Everybody brings something different. And in the orchestra, as I tell my students, we have a very special phenomenon happening. And I tell them, an orchestra is a reflection of the community. Every orchestra, just like every community, is composed by people who are very, very different, who come from very different walks of life, who come from having, many different life experiences, and everybody is important. Every instrument is important in the community. You know, if the people who work with the municipality taking the trash don't come, that creates a big problem for everybody else. So that should teach us that that job, for example, is extremely important and extremely valuable. What happens when the clarinetist is not in the orchestra, or the bassoon, or one of the violins, or one of the percussion? We feel that absence. It creates a hole. So it affects the environment. It affects the orchestra. So once we acknowledge that everybody is important, we can let go of, thinking one section is superior than the other, for example, which is something that happens very often with the violins. Oh, I only want to play first violin. Oh, and second violins, they're not as able. That is not true at all. And that is, something that is completely necessary. You have to have the two sections, and they have to be both strong. So everything works together as one. And I think having an orchestra that represents different people all at once together is such a wonderful thing, because then at that point, no difference matters. It doesn't matter where people come from, what language they speak, because at that moment we're all speaking music, and we're all doing it together, and we're all understanding it and being a part of it. And that's, to me, one of the most beautiful things. And the diversity only makes everything richer.
I'm still thinking about the fact that I said there was no social media when you started. which makes people think that you're an ancient relic, which you are not. But even though the difference between us is around 15 years, what I meant is when you came to Venezuela and you were 28, social media for us did not exist. Number one, because internet was not a thing. And at that time, you could not take pictures with your phone. You had to use these cameras with the little thing and everything, because the development of the country, as what we knew, was very limited. And then, of course, that's why my point was you being able to travel, to study abroad, to contact all of these things. And now today, be in front of a classroom where you have students who have AI doing their assignments for them, where you have softwares and things that you just ask for a piece of music and it's done. You want to have a picture, a 4K recording with audio, visuals and everything, and then you just click here, done. Like I didn't know what internet was until I was 15. And so that's really my point. And of course, for me, the very big struggle happened when I came here to the US to live here because of my studies, after being in more than 40 countries on international tours. So I had the experience, the international exchange, the multicultural view of the world, but it's something different, absolutely different, when you have to come to a place that is completely new to live for longer than 1 month, which is usually what our tours were like. So for me, someone that is so affectionate, someone that is so, like you said, we are very extroverted, we are loud, we are loving people. And then the first thing I was shocked by this cultural shock. It's like, hi, and then you hug someone, they go, sorry, we don't do that here. So for me, you won't believe it, but for me, that also had an impact on my playing, on the way that I even thought about music. So do I need to stop being myself? Do I need to stop being this open and passionate when I play because that's not culturally accepted? So as a Latino, as a person coming from El Sistema, where we are just like human blenders, we're and moving and all of that when we play, and then coming here and having to be on this glass box was really tough. And then realizing that we didn't even have to do that. This was not about assimilating a different culture. It was just about culturizing ourselves and understanding that things here are different, without giving up on our nature, on our traditions, our values, our beliefs. So that's where my question was kind of like targeting the idea that this chronological separation between your experience and my experience, and how your experience impacted my experience, my career, and where I am now, and the work that we do now together in the foundation, can serve as a reference for all of those students that think that it's just about going to school, playing, doing the assignments, and then getting a diploma. This is way, way, way more than that. And that's why it's so important for me to make sure that what you went through and what you experienced also has a meaningful significance, because it's not detached from the art of playing, from conducting. I don't believe that when you stand in front of an orchestra, you are not the same Diego. So all of these things are really, really important. And that's why I want to ask you, in your opinion, what role do cultural diversity and inclusion plays in the development of success for orchestras and musical institutions? I know that during this season, you were doing Latin American composers at the university and performing a variety of pieces and repertoire. So how have you seen these pieces like Danzón by Arturo Márquez and all of this series of music have an impact in the community of musicians who had never been exposed to this music?
Yeah, both the musicians and the audience. So, yeah, I feel it's interesting because most people in the audience identify more with American composers. So this, for example, this last concert that I performed, it was music of the Americas. And so it included some music by Aaron Copland, who, as you know, is very well established, is a beloved composer of the United States and the world, but, very respected here. And it's interesting because after the concert, I spoke with some people who came to me, and they said, as soon as you started that piece, I just lost it. And I just started crying because I just connected so much with it. And then the rest, oh my gosh, I just had no idea. All this music was so incredible and so infectious and so different and so rich. And I was like, so exactly, that's the point of this. The music of Latin America brings to the table a whole different a reality and culture. For the students, for example, it was very interesting to see how they reacted to Danzón number 2 by Arturo Márquez. They couldn't get enough of it. And especially, I shared the story of your orchestra, when I told them, we played this huge concert and it was very successful. And, at the end, as if that wasn't enough, the orchestra decided to play that piece without conductor, without music, and they all started dancing as they were playing. And so I want you to dance too. I told my orchestra, and some of them, they actually did. And so that's kind of the thing that I'm trying to bring, some of those flavors and some of that diversity, some of that experience. Because like you just mentioned, we come from a different reality where we are completely open and very extroverted, and then we come here and everything is much colder and everything is much more stiff and I don't know, mechanical. The students don't think or don't know that they can enjoy it just as much. And so I tell them, if you feel the urge to move, to sway, side to side, go for it. Don't resist. A few years ago, we played another danzón that I composed, that it was based on Arturo Márquez's danzón. And the orchestra liked that very much too, and the audience too. So I think that bringing all of that and showing it, on the concert stage is very, very important for both the students and for the audience. The students, they get firsthand experience because they get to play and they get to learn about the culture through the music. And they get to learn about, how we feel the music in Latin America. And the people who come to listen to the concerts, well, they get a taste of, a very different type of music that make, our blood boil, which is very, very different and exciting and foreign to them. And I think nowadays we need so much more of that. And especially, in our times when everything seems to just be, flying off the cliff, culturally speaking, politically speaking, it's such a mess everywhere. I think one of the most important things that we can do as artists and musicians in this country is to make everybody aware that there are other countries in the world that are just as valuable. They may not have, the same type of material riches that we see here or the facilities, but there's an entire different, type of wealth, human wealth, that lives through the music and that is very much worth exploring and bringing and sharing with everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a reality that we are now, especially when we are in a time that is considered by many scientists and people who are experts in the area as the digital era of the emotions. Everything is moved by the emotions, but everything happens within this frame of immediately. It's like inmediatez, like everything happens so quickly, so fast, because of the internet, because of the online resources. So just because of a matter of time, we only have 2 more minutes for this episode. I would like to ask you, looking ahead, to the future of this industry and what you could predict is going to be, the future of classical music and everything that you are doing, what advice would you give to musicians that are pursuing the same path, or similar paths, from what we have, and what is something that you want them to never forget about?
I'm going to quote one of my heroes from my childhood, and it happens to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he says, whatever it is that drives you, do it now. Do it now. Don't wait. We need to start to get things done, and not wait for things to come down from heaven, or for somebody to, ask us to do it, because in the end it's us, the ones who want, this or that. So I think that advice, that little bit of information that he said, struck a chord with me, and I think he's completely right. We need to start finding and pursuing whatever it is that makes us, go and do it. So I would tell, young musicians and people who want to get into music, start going to classes, find teachers. Now there's so much, digital resources. Go to YouTube. There are hundreds of thousands of tutorials there. Samuel himself, he has so many useful things. And like him, for every instrument, I'm sure, I just haven't looked, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. There's everything under the sun for anybody who's interested in this or that. So I would say just go ahead and do it and start seeing if you like it or not. And don't try to cheat. Don't try to take shortcuts. Shortcuts won't help, especially if you want to play, and if you want to, be good. A machine won't play for you. Unless, if you go into digital playing and digital recording, and then you work with loops and things that have already been done, and that's completely possible, but that's an entirely different kind of work, and you need very specialized equipment for that. But before you get there, you have to understand how things work, and the only way to do that is through study, and an honest one. So I would say that is my advice. Know yourself, know what you want, go for it, and work hard. We have all had to do it to get to where we are, and being where we are doesn't mean that we're done by a long shot. We keep going. We are not done. We have a lot to do, and to do for others too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Diego. And I hope that this serves as a platform of inspiration for everyone who listens to us, for everyone who wants to know the stories behind the music, just like our podcast is named, so that they can be in tune with the reality that we live in today's world. I'm so excited to be able to have you and to join us in changing the life of many students, not only here in the US, but around South America, Central America, and Africa. This is really an extraordinary opportunity for us. And I hope that next time is not only going to be a podcast, through distance, but we're going to be together, and we're going to be recording the experiences of what we talk about so much during this episode, so that people is able to see in real time what we do and what everything that we are sharing is really about. So thank you so much. And on behalf of the foundation and the board of directors, I want to thank you for giving and gifting your time for this episode. Also celebrating the Volunteer Week Challenge of the foundation, which is happening this week. Thank you so much.
Yay. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And having met you so many years ago is something that I've always, cherish and remember fondly. I'm very proud of you. see where you are and what you're doing, and thank you for letting me be a part of it too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we'll see each other on the last episode of this season next week. Thank you so much. This was In Tune with Reality, the stories behind the music, our Vargas Foundation podcast, and we'll see you soon.